Hello and welcome back to the Movie Pope podcast. And today we are going to be taking a look at 2024's Alien Romulus, the latest installment in the Alien franchise by Ridley Scott. But before we dive in, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know down in the comments how we're doing, if you agree with our assessments. And if there's a movie or TV show you'd like us to take a look at, let us know. But without further ado, because we do like to keep things moving, let's dive in. Lee, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I think that's a great message for today because I feel like there's a lot to talk about with this. So the Alien franchise, right? I guess we should start off there. So I really enjoyed the first two Alien films, right? You got the first Alien, you got Aliens, you got Alien 3, you got Alien Resurrection, you got Prometheus, you got Alien Covenant. So, and I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of other Alien products and stuff out there. We won't talk about AVP or anything like that, but there's a lot of Alien stuff out there. And I would say the first two are probably some of my not only favorite horror / sci-fi films, they're probably some of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, and it's weird, too, because you think that they found the perfect formula, but as they progressed, it just seemed like things just got more and more stale. Whatever Ridley Scott did in the original and whatever James Cameron did in the sequel, I guess for whatever reason they just missed the mark, in subsequent films.
Yeah,
I was gonna say too, because we did a trailer reaction for this, earlier in the year during the summertime, and we were a bit apprehensive about it, after reviewing it. So going into watching this movie, I kind of went in with low expectations, but at the same time, I was thinking, to use your words, I mean, at this point, the bar has been set so low. How further low could it go? And
I was gonna say cautiously optimistic. Like I kind of had a little bit, like I liked the feel from the trailer. So there's things I like going in, but I think there is that looming sense of dread that this could easily fall on its face.
I mean, especially when you have a younger cast, because and this has been the theme for 2024, and I promise you, this is not something that we planned. It's just one of those happy accidents. It's one of those things where Hollywood will take a well-known franchise and then try to do a reboot of it, right? And you kind of get the feeling that they want the cast and story to stand on its own, but they lean so hard into the member berries. It's like it's just so easy to mess things up. I mean, obviously the biggest example is Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire and Afterlife. It's the biggest culprit in our book. But Lee, why don't you go ahead and take us into Alien Romulus?
Sure. Yes, and kind of an interesting start to it, right? I think I'm not sure if I would have gone this direction. I want to get your feedback on this. So really, it kind of opens up with the fact that we have the alien from the first one, right? That I think we all assumed was dead. They pretty much recovered out in space. And I thought that was kind of a weird choice to make because I feel like it almost nullifies everything that Sigourney Weaver's character went through in the original one by having it still be alive. So I don't know. I feel like there's different things you could have done. How did you feel about it? And what would you change if you feel like a change would have been necessary?
Honestly, I wouldn't have included that in the first place because right off the bat, you take the mystery out of it. Because to your point, the reason why the first film was so good is because we don't know where this thing comes from. It just appears out of nowhere and it starts terrorizing the people. And had they taken that out, right, it would have added more and more mystery to it because then the new crew would have been just as much in the dark as the original crew of the Nostromo. I mean, because originally when I saw the intro, I was like, "Hang on, am I watching the right movie here?" because from the very beginning, it made me think, "Oh, this is probably like a lead into like something else like Aliens or Alien 3." But no, they just recovered the body of I guess a drone. It's not the Queen. It's a drone, right?
Correct. Yes, it was the one from the first one. So,
Okay.
and I think a good thing to mention because you brought it up, and that was a really good call out. This takes place chronologically between the first and second Alien films. So thank you
It
for
takes
bringing
place
it up.
it takes
Important
place
for
a
people
year
to know.
after the first one, right?
I don't know how long it is, but I want to say they said 10 years.
Okay.
I don't know what made me think that. I want to say it was 10 years, but it is somewhere between the first and second one.
Yeah, in the intermediate year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do agree. I thought it was maybe you could have done something else with it, and it would have made it just as plausible story, without, to me, kind of making everything that Ripley went through maybe not as big. So, but we do get once we kind of start meeting the characters, right? We got Rain, who is our um, title character, right? And it's kind of weird to think like Alien, like ever since Ripley, right? It's always been a female lead in it. And I know a lot of people talk about Sigourney Weaver and how, she kind of embodies like this strong woman character. And it's kind of interesting how they've kept with that throughout the whole series. Not that I have any issues with it, because I think Rain I liked, and I think really a standout for me was the character Andy, who plays kind of this kind of like malfunctioning android that like doesn't really function properly. And it's supposed to be kind of watching over Rain, but I definitely feel like Rain does more of the watching over of Andy.
Yeah, that's
when it comes down to everything.
Yeah, that's what kind of confused me, because the way they explained it was her dad reprogrammed Andy to kind of be like an older brother to her, but but the entire time you're watching the movie, it's like like you said, it's kind of the reverse. It's only like as you get further and further into the film, like he kind of begins to assume more of that role of watching over her, but but that's because his program gets modified, as we'll mention later on.
Yes, and a very interesting, I would say, underlying plot thread. And well, I guess I shouldn't say underlying because it's really in your face. But in an Alien film, it's kind of interesting where they, I guess, put a lot of the story behind. But yeah, so we have these two characters, right? And they're trying to go off world. They want to go to a planet and just be able to live there, away from everything.
Yeah,
away from Weyland-Yutani, right? The company that we heard in the first one, Weyland-Yutani. And pretty much they're kind of screwing over Rain, right? They're like, oh, hey, by the way, I know you're supposed to be able to get off here, but we need everyone to work double now. So now we're going to extend your contract. I think they said like 5 or 6 years or something ridiculous, right?
Yeah. It's a mining colony. Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of gets off this, very bad feeling. And I mean, you kind of know that from Weyland-Yutani. It's not really on the up and up, but you see very clearly here. So, I think this kind of puts the mindset for the character Rain into this mission, right? So what ends up happening is we get to meet more of our characters, not to be confused with Clear Fodder. So we meet Tyler, who's her ex-boyfriend, his sister, Kay, who happens to be pregnant, and then they have their cousin Bjorn, and their sister Navarro. I'm sorry, his sister Navarro. Bjorn's sister is Navarro.
Yeah.
So you kind of meet all these characters, and I don't know about you. This is probably where I started having some issues with it, is I just didn't like the characters. And I think you hit the nail on the head at the very beginning. We're talking about this. They just all feel too young. They're all kind of just these, like, I don't know. I miss kind of the cast, like when I think of the first one, right? You kind of have like this, group of people. A lot of, like, some of them were like really aged and rugged. All
the
like
professionals, basically.
Bunch of kids. I'm sorry. What was that? I apologize.
No, I was gonna say, with the first crew, they're professionals. They've been doing this for years. They know what they're doing.
Yes.
Right. Whereas here, it's like, I mean, I don't want to sound ageist, but I kind of find it difficult to believe that Navarro would be able to do all these fancy piloting things, right? And and as much as I don't like having background disclosed, I just find it a little bit weird that Navarro would know how to pilot a ship like that so expertly without someone mentioning, oh yeah, she used to do this for years and years, or the fact that Tyler would just happen to know how a pulse rifle works.
Yeah. There's a lot of that stuff. Tyler's another big culprit where he just kind of seems to be like just really good at a lot of different things, and there's not really a whole lot of clarity.
And he just happens to know a lot about this stuff too. And I was hoping for a payoff where they would say, oh, Tyler used to work with the Colonial Marines or whatever, or his parents knew someone and they taught him that stuff. No, you don't know anything about that. And Bjorn, I feel like he was the most useless out of all the characters, because the backstory that he has is he doesn't like synths is because one of the synths shut off one of the shafts that his mother was in and she died, right? So that explains why he doesn't like synths. But it's like, is that something we really need to know? Because it's irrelevant in the grand scheme of things.
I feel like they try to rationalize his hatred for the character, so it's kind of like iRobot in a way, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of like, oh, I don't like these androids because they made a very I guess android type of decision where
a logical move
situation.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this too. And I don't know what your thoughts are. I felt like when they did give background information, they gave it to the wrong people, right? Like, I would have loved to learn more about Navarro's and Tyler's background, but instead they let us know what was going on with Bjorn. I'm like, Bjorn's not going to make it in the next 10 minutes. Like, why would I care why he doesn't like synths? I want to know more about what's going on with Tyler here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, especially for me, Bjorn was the character I disliked the most, and it was by a mile. So trying to give him character to me was a total waste, because it's really, I don't like in films, and I think this was probably one of my biggest challenges with it is I hate films where there's just a guy that's just like clearly there to be hated. Like, there's just nothing redeeming about him. He's just constantly an asshole the whole time.
Yeah, just like in a certain review we did last month, involving a vampire ballerina.
It's true. Yep, I had the same feeling as I was going through this. Was I cannot wait for Bjorn to die. So, so we meet our very diverse group of characters, right? That seem to touch on every background we can have. And their mission is they're going to go up to this spaceship, right? This really big one. I think they reference it as like a colony, but pretty much they're going there to get this cryostasis equipment so they can kind of make their own journey to a different planet, right? So they end up like having all of them go up there, right? And then for, I guess, the initial kind of job was we had the three male characters go on the ship first, while the female characters stayed on their own ship. So the male characters are out there, and they're kind of like looking for this cryostasis equipment. And where I think things kind of start to heat up is they get locked in this room.
Literally heat up, by the way.
Yeah, they get locked in this room, and obviously, if you've seen any of the Alien films before, you see some outlines, and you could see what's in there. They don't know anything about facehuggers and all that stuff. We as an audience do. But I think that kind of helps ramp up the tension because we kind of know what's happening here. So they decide like, oh, well, now that we have, all these males on here, well, now we need to get Rain on the ship, and we need to get Navarro on the ship. And that's what we kind of see. So Rain and Navarro come on the ship in order to help save the male characters. And this is where we see a certain android, right, which we'll visit later, but he's kind of like you don't see him directly, so that's kind of that. But they take out this module that's in his head, and they give it to Andy with the idea that Andy will now be able to escape the room because he'll have the necessary protocols in order to do that.
Yeah, and the reason why they wanted Rain's because they wanted Andy.
Yes,
because he could access, because he could access most of the Weyland-Yutani facilities without any issue.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So and I think they unfortunately make it, and this is Bjorn's character, right? Makes it abundantly clear that they're absolutely there just to use Andy. And then honestly, they're going to use them and ditch them, right? Because kind of something that's running in the background of all this is the fact that, Andy's pretty much going to be not joining them for the journey. So, I think that kind of adds this like extra layer to it. So, we see them, and I do like this sequence, right? Where all the face huggers are starting to come out, and they're kind of navigating in the water and everything. You don't really know what's going to happen. We finally get to see some good action there, and I always just like the idea of the face huggers. Like, what is your thoughts on the face hugger? The kind of, I don't want to describe it as a character, but what do you think of the face huggers there?
They're just such terrifying little creatures because,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they explain it, in that scene with Navarro, I think they do it perfectly because once it latches onto your face, that's it. It's going to tighten its tail around them, and it won't let go until it's implanted whatever it needs to implant inside of you, right? So really, once that's done, that's it. It's a death sentence. You're pretty much living on borrowed time. I will say though, I just think it's kind of ridiculous how they managed to escape the face huggers pretty easily in that containment chamber, because I assume it would be a lot more difficult to try to escape them because they are very persistent little buggers. You know what I mean?
They are.
So the fact that Tyler and Bjorn are able to escape without getting implanted is a bit weird. But then Navarro ends up getting attacked. That came as a shock to me because I was like, out of all the characters, I thought Bjorn would probably be the first one to go, but no, he kind of hangs on a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I think we're all kind of hoping it is too. So it is a very, I would say, interesting thing, right? Because we kind of remember, like, once that face hugger is near you, like, it's really hard to deal with it. But they're kind of just swatting them away. So
that's that's what infuriated me, because I'm like,
yeah,
there's no way you can ditch them that easily, and that's another thing too, because the xenomorphs, they spit that acidic blood, right, that burns through everything. And we'll probably get to it later, but that scene where they're in the nest and Rain turns off the gravity and they just happen to float by and not get hit with the acid. I'm like, okay, this is beyond belief. Like, I literally cannot believe what I'm watching here. But
yeah,
I'm putting the cart before the horse here. But sorry,
we'll get there. Trust me, we will get to that part. So, but yeah, you're right. So we got Navarro. So she gets the face hug, right? So she's our first victim, right? And this is where we finally get to see a little bit more of the android Rook, right? That's there, and it's played by terrible CGI Ian Holmes.
The late Ian Holm, I might add.
Yeah, the late. Thank you. That's actually a great thing to add too. Now, I know I've watched stuff, and I know that the family had given the blessing for it. I believe they talked to his wife, and the wife was like, "Yeah, he would have really liked to have been a part of this." So I'm glad that they did at least some legwork for it, but I still feel iffy about it. And I feel like for me, right, it wasn't needed, right? Like, to me, like, we've seen so many iterations of that android. Ian Holmes is not the only one that's always been there.
I mean, they could have called Lance Hendrickson and said, "Hey,
exactly,
would you like to have a small role in this?" Yeah,
exactly. Like, to me, that would have made more sense, and then I think you could have escaped all the terrible look of it, or you could just come a totally different direction. Like, it wasn't needed.
Well,
that's what bothered me the most.
Well, let me run this idea by you, because as I was watching yesterday, it reminded me of that scene from Captain America, in The Winter Soldier, where we see Arnim Zola. You remember that room that they're in, that Hydra room under the base of New Jersey, and they see Arnim Zola's face pop up on the screen. It's not really Arnim Zola's face, but it's kind of like an approximation.
Yes.
I was thinking, instead of just having a horrible CGI rendition of Ian Holm, they could have had a computerized version of his face pop up on the screen, and they still would have been able to accomplish the same thing that they did in that movie, right?
That's
Because
that's a great call out.
because the way because obviously because of the way that the technology looks, it's all like 8-bit and all blocky and stuff like that. They could make it in such a way that it's an approximation of Ian Holm without actually being Ian Holm, and they still would have been able to accomplish all the stuff that they wanted to do without having to, like I said, do what they did in that movie. Plus, I don't know about you, but I kind of got the feeling like when they hooked him up and he was like talking, it looked like his hand was kind of like trying to like feel like what was going on below his waist, like he was trying to still figure out, oh, do I still have legs? And I kept thinking, like, is it just me? Like, just keep your hands where you are. Like,
I honestly never picked up on that, so I think you're paying way close attention to
I'm
what Ian
sorry,
Holmes' fans were doing in all these scenes.
I'm sorry, I'm being pedantic again. I'm sorry.
I didn't pick up on that at all. I guess I'll have to check it out because I am curious about that. But I think what you brought up was a great point, because really the physical body of the android was really not needed throughout all of this.
Yeah.
Like, it pretty much is just there in the room and just remains in there. So you absolutely could have gotten away with doing something different and maybe just use Ian Holmes' voice or however they did that.
Yeah. Plus, doesn't he have like controller access to the ship that they're on anyway?
Yes, he does talk with Mother a lot, and
yeah,
he seems to be able to converse with Andy as well in some type of like not physical sense, like we're talking face to face. Like, he's able to communicate to him in different ways. So
yeah.
A lot of different things there that I think they could have done. And so they devised the plan, right? So Navarro's there, and the reason that they're talking with Rook is to see if he has any type of idea about it. And they decide to like freeze the tail. And they take the face hugger off of Navarro once they freeze that, and that made me just feel nauseous the whole time. Like, they're pulling that thing out, and like, I don't know. I don't know much about the anatomy of the face hugger, but like that little like tentacle thing that was deep down in her mouth. Like that it was just like, I'm thinking like how to describe it, like clowns when they're pulling out like all the scarves and it just never ends. That's what I kind of felt like when they're yanking the face hugger off her face.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of a Bizarre Foods episode where they went to South Korea and they were eating like live octopus, and they're trying to swallow like the moving tentacles, but it keeps like squirming out. That's what it made me think of. Sorry,
I like it, but it was gruesome to look at, and I think this is what kind of sets in motion, right? So there's they look to Rook, and Rook's like, there's a 60-40 chance, referencing to the fact that she's infected. And this kind of brings up, I don't know, I'm very conflicted by this, but this kind of brings up this whole thing with Andy, right? And I guess I want to talk about Andy just a little bit more here. So Andy, for the most part, through it, he's very childish, right? Like, he's this damaged goods type of thing. He kind of like has these like weird malfunctions, and he's very, polite, kind of a very nice character. And then when he gets the module put in, it kind of they use the term, it upgrades him or upgrades his AI or whatever, and like fixes like some of his weird mannerisms. And he kind of turns into a totally different character. And I liked it, but I also thought it was weird that it was so much a focus for this film around his character and what's happening. So I wanted to get your feedback on that. Like, how did you feel about everything that happened? Because I think for Andy's character, I think he did a fantastic job. The actor that played him did fantastic with this. And I think he was my absolute standout from this, to kind of change from this very kind of young, playful type of person that's almost childlike, to being this like very cold, methodical, thinking robot type of thing. It was a very interesting, and they did a very good job of kind of turning from one to the other really quickly. But I don't know how much I like this for an alien film. So what were your thoughts about that?
I kind of enjoyed it, just because of the fact that once that chip is in Andy's head, you kind of don't know if he's really looking out for Rain or if he's looking out
Yes,
in the interest of Wayland Yutani.
that's true.
But but he does reference, he's looking out for the betterment of the company.
Yes.
At the end, they just happen to be in the way. You remember that scene where they're being chased and he shuts the door on them, and Tyler and Rain barely escape the Queen. They get into that I think it's the hangar, and I think it's either Rain or Tyler who like berates him, and he's like,
Yeah,
well,
Rain did in that one. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he's like, I did calculate, that you have sufficient time to get through the door. And I'm like, okay, that's very much what an android built by Wayland Yutani would say, because he's very disconnected. He's not as much, concerned about, about the humans as he was when he didn't have that upgrade. I was gonna, and I was gonna say too, like another scene that really stands out was when Kay's like banging on the door asking for them to open it, and Andy refuses, and his logic is, it's because the Queen or that drone is using them as bait, really. And I'm like, you could open the door, and they, you can get in, and then they can just close it real quickly, right? It's not like the aliens, cut off the power or anything.
I disagree with that. Nope. I'm going to disagree with that. I think that was him making a very cold and calculated choice, and I totally agree. I think the xenomorph of it had absolutely no issue getting to the whole crew. I think he was 100% right with that.
I also got a David and Walter vibe from him too.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
I mean,
the same person, right? Literally the same person.
Right. Because Walter is, to your point, Walter is Andy before the upgrade, very childlike, very naive, very, very friendly, quote unquote. Whereas David, he embodies this more of the cold, calculating, ruthless character that we see in Rook, because we later find out that Rook he's been kind of busy on that that station. He hasn't been just laying there, trying to see where his legs are, really. But yes, but yeah, go on. I don't want to give too much away.
It does absolutely play this very interesting role, because you don't really know until it kind of says it more outright, like you pointed out. But it does have this very interesting dynamic that we don't really know if it's someone that we can trust. Like, we trust Andy without the upgrade or without the, the extra little thing from the androids, but we don't know if we could trust this version of it. So I think it does.
But to be fair, that is typical with androids in the Alien franchise, because you don't really know where they are. I mean, it's like that with Ash, it's like that with Bishop, and obviously it's like that with David and Walter, and now it's typical with Andy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree, and like I said, I think it does kind of play this kind of interesting role that's a lot more clear as far as why we're going to have some of those struggles. So, but yeah, so we see Navarro. She's kind of gets, when they take the facehugger off, she kind of gets kind of back in the swing of stuff. Very much, she kind of has the reaction of who was the guy in the first one that initially gets attacked.
I only know it's John Hurt's character.
John Hurt's character, yeah. I'm forgetting the name, but it felt like very similar to how his reaction was. Like, he kind of like wakes up and he's like, I just remember darkness and being like covered. And she kind of almost reacts like she remembers, the last thing she remembers is the thing attaching to her face, and then everything stops. So I always thought that was kind of interesting how it's like it's almost like their minds turn off when they get attached to it.
Oh, it's Kane, by the way.
Kane, thank you. Excellent. So we're worried about this, and this is kind of where we see Andy being more of that I'm a machine type of thing, because he realizes that there is a probability that Navarro is I guess has an alien inside of her. So what do you do in that situation? And Andy, I think kind of turns to his, I guess more thinking like a machine, where it's like, well, it's not worth the risks of the group for this to happen. So he kind of becomes a little bit of the villain here for a bit, right? Where he pretty much is chasing after Navarro and her brother Bjorn as they go back to the ship in order to escape. And in record timing, we see the facehugger starts to burst out of Navarro, and we, kind of see like the little baby alien come out. And this is, I think, the first time that, or this is the first time that we've seen kind of the alien in all of its glory, so to say, at least the little baby version of it. So, so Navarro is trying to, I guess, accidentally like kicks the joystick to move the ship out, and the ship ends up like going out of a part of the bigger ship, right? The Romulus and the Remus. So ends up like leaving part, and then it crashes back into another sector that's there. So kind of goofy how that worked out, where they just leave and then crash back in.
But you want to know what's weird is the fact that it didn't suffer any major damage.
It's
right?
true. Yep.
That's what made me scratch my head, because I'm like, because the way that it's moving around, crashing into things, I would have assumed like maybe like one of the cells or one of the fuel rods or something gets damaged in the process, but no, like it just crashes into the hangar serendipitously, and it's like, oh, okay, we can just get back in there and fly out.
Yes.
But I don't know. That's just me.
Yeah, no. It was odd, and I think like there are definitely things where you have to really suspend your disbelief, and it is kind of interesting because like we know the facehuggers take longer to do what they did. Like this happened in a matter of minutes. Now you can make the argument like they were clearly bioengineering these, so like did they like accelerate stuff? Is this the facehuggers that we know? Like there's just a lot of different things that you can look at with this. But I do think that there is at least some, kind of things there. But I think for the sake of brevity and just making sure that the film goes as intended, I wasn't really bothered by having like the facehugger and the being impregnated with the alien. It being like a really short turnaround time didn't really bother me, at least for myself. So now we kind of have our two separate groups, right? We have Kay. With Bjorn in one part of the ship, and then we have Rain, Tyler, and Andy on another part, right? So they're pretty much there to go on this rescue mission, and you do get this sense throughout, right, that we don't know how much we want to trust Andy throughout, which kind of makes it interesting because like you need him to navigate through the ship, and he does play like a part of it, but it's hard to really judge how much of Andy's still there versus how much is being taken over. And I do think they played that really well because I think that adds an extra layer of suspense to that. So they're trying to get through the ship. We see Bjorn and Kay, and we kind of go back and forth a few times with the two groups. And we see Bjorn, he sees the alien, right? And we see it like gestating in one of its pods. And we see Bjorn with his like little cattle prod thing. He kind of sticks it in there and starts zapping it. And I like how like the tail comes out and just like catches him in the face. And then he's just kind of like he's just kind of like sitting there, like kind of, I guess I would say kind of out of it. He's kind of in shock of what happened. And then the alien just starts gooping on it, right? He just starts like, bleeding on him or whatever. And I think that was kind of a very kind of a wild scene to see, like where you see him like really start to get in half. You really start to see all like the venom kind of hit him, and he starts to see all like his body corrode and everything. And that takes Bjorn out, and I'm like, oh, thank God. Like that was the one character I was like, please, like, I don't want to root for the alien because it's really the bad guy, but just please kill Bjorn because he's really obnoxious.
His death was very satisfying.
Yes, it was. Though it was kind of weird, like he kind of like exploded at the end. Did you notice that? Like I mean, like all like stuff is like gooing on him, and then you just see kind of like it just kind of like he explodes from the inside. Kind of. I thought that was weird. Did you pick up on that, or was I paying too close attention to his death?
I mean, I was just happy that he was gone. I really didn't care at that point.
Yes, I totally agree. So it was, like I said, a very refreshing thing to see him die. because he absolutely was one of the characters that we did not like at all. So we kind of see we see our main group. They go through this like face hugger room, right, where they have to like be very quiet. You can't like get like really upset or stuff because the face huggers, I guess, will notice you. So that was kind of a weird thing about the face hugger lore, I guess.
Yeah, because they can detect body heat or something, kind of like the Predator.
Yes. I thought it was kind of weird. I don't know if they've ever like brought that up in any of the other ones. Kind of a weird thing. I mean, it makes sense why they don't go after Andy. But in that same token, it is, I do find it kind of weird that they brought up all the stuff with the heat and everything. So, but yeah, so we have them. They eventually make it to Kay, but Andy's very reluctant to open the door because he feels like, the xenomorph will be able to get them. So yeah, I like this scene, and I guess we'll talk about it a little bit because I'm curious about your feedback because you said you kind of felt more open to that. So I actually felt like at this moment, this was him making a very rational choice, which obviously I know that's what they're going for. But to me, it made sense. So I guess maybe this is like something for me. Maybe I'm a cold thinking machine and you're more of a human being. I don't know. Do I need to look into myself now thinking the way that I do? Or I don't know. What was your thoughts about that? Because I think it's really interesting to expand upon that because I felt like he made the right call, but it sounds like you feel differently. So what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I kind of feel like, maybe he could have done something, but at the end of the day, I mean, if that's how he's supposed to act for the overall good of the crew, then yeah, he did make the right call. I just feel, I just feel like that was a very cold and calculating move to make, and it kind of harkens back to what Tyler said about Bjorn's antipathy towards androids at the very beginning.
Yes.
I mean, but the fact that Rain is still able to overlook all of that near the end kind of shows that it's not so much about Andy's character, but it's more about how the humans kind of interact and view the androids around them. Because obviously Bjorn has a much more negative approach than Rain. Rain, has a far more forgiving nature about her. Even though Kay ends up getting getting taken by the xenomorph at the end.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is where, and for me, once Kay gets, kind of taken, right? Because I guess spoiler, she's not dead yet. I guess another spoiler there by saying yet, but she gets taken. And I think for me, this is where there's a very definite shift in the film, at least for me, right? So up until now, right, we're a little bit more than halfway through, right? We're probably about 60%, 55, somewhere in there through the film, right? And I feel like from here on, minus a few scenes, I feel like a lot of this section is a callback to previous ones. Now, I say that, obviously in the first part, there definitely are some callbacks, right? I don't want to pretend like it wasn't happening before.
Yeah, but it wasn't as heavy-handed though.
Exactly. Yeah, it was more subtle. It was like, oh, look, when you see the technology for the first time, it's like, oh, this looks very much like I would imagine, in that Alien to Aliens time frame. It looks very familiar. So
but it's very consistent. But it's very consistent too. If you think about it, they're not because like with the technology in Prometheus, it looks far more advanced than what you would see in
yes.
in the quote unquote regular timeline.
Yes.
I will, and I keep referencing this over and over again, but I feel like I have to. The first half of the movie, you kind of have this sort of interest in what's going on with with these groups of people because this is a brand new crew and they're encountering the xenomorph for the first time, and you're kind of interested to see what their reaction is and what they're going to do, right? But just like with the Ghostbusters Afterlife, the first half of the movie, you meet the new crew and you're trying to develop a relationship and a rapport with them, and you're feeling like, okay, I could sort of see them kind of like standing on their own 2 feet, and then the second half of the movie, that's when they slap on all the nostalgia, and then it's like, okay, that's great. Now I have no interest in in these new characters because you brought me right back to the original.
Yes, I agree. And I think that this is where, to me, it kind of cheapens a lot of the story too, because I feel like they try to do everything. They try to put so many different story beats in here that it really kind of just, I think, ruins the momentum the first half. And I'm just going to kind of rifle through these, Luca. Now, I'm sure that there's plenty of stuff that's out there. And if you remember any of these, I just kind of call this the nostalgia section because I felt like I could very clearly place where I see some of these events just directly taken from the previous films, right? So we have our 3 surviving characters, right? We got Rain, we got Tyler, and we got Andy. So they end up going to this part of the ship where we see that, we find out that Weyland-Yutani had been playing with the xenomorph DNA. And I don't know if you're paying attention, but in the music, you hear the Prometheus, kind of like, I guess, the iconic score from that. Did you pick up on that? I wanted to see if you had your eyes out. Had your ears out for the music there.
I'll admit I didn't, but but the way that they were experimenting with the alien DNA definitely reminded me of Prometheus, Alien Covenant. So
yeah, absolutely, and
so it somewhat brought me back to it, but just not in the same way that you did.
Yeah, and actually, you should. I would say after we're done recording this, like I would definitely listen to that scene because it is very interesting. Because they like show like the little hologram, and it very much looks like that like black sphere that they find in Prometheus. So like a very clear callback to that. You have the characters. They have like the gun montage, right? It's very very much reminiscent of what they did in Aliens, with Sigourney Weaver and Give me help here, Luca. In Aliens, Sigourney Weaver and what's his butt?
Who, Bishop?
No. The guy, the main guy, the one that survives up until the end. The one that's from Terminator.
You
know what I'm talking about, right?
Hicks?
Yes, thank you. Yes, Hicks. Okay. Yes. So yeah, like he does like the same thing where like he's got like the gun and he's showing Ripley how to use it. It's very much like this where Tyler's helping Rain kind of show how they're using it. So we gotta have like that montage. So they're trying to escape. Our group ends up running into Kay. So Kay is alive, but she's severely wounded. And I like how they kind of like contemplate like giving her that black goo, right? So we just recovered it now, and now we're thinking of using it. Very much harkens back to like kind of Prometheus, whereas with David's character, he kind of forced it upon the crew. This it's kind of like an option. So kind of interesting that maybe there's a different way of looking at that type of situation where he kind of throws it out there as a choice, but you kind of feel like he's doing it because he's trying to support, the company Weyland-Yutani more than trying to support Kay. But they end up rescuing Kay, and this is where Tyler gets attacked and killed, which is a shame. I kind of wanted to see him maybe survive a little bit longer, or maybe kind of be like what Corporal Hicks was in the second one. But unfortunately he gets killed, and you kind of see like now the one xenomorph, you clearly see that there's all these other xenomorphs. So now we've kind of we moved away from it being kind of this one single alien like we kind of been dealing with so far, and thinking back to like the Alien franchise as a whole, the original one. Now it's very much feeling like, oh, now we got like a whole bunch of aliens, like in the Aliens and some of the subsequent sequels that they have out there. During the sequence as well, you have Andy gets injured. So pretty much Rain and Kay are able to escape. Rain decides like, hey, I want to go back for Andy. So she kind of leaves Kay to her own devices, and Kay ends up like injecting herself with the black goo. So you see Rain, she goes back and she gets Andy, and we kind of see them going down there. And this is where we have that zero graph sequence, right? That I know you brought up earlier, and I guess is as good as time to talk about it. For me, it was a really cool idea, but I think it was just executed poorly because it's so goofy to think about because you're trying to dodge like liquid in space, and I don't know. I like the idea of it, but I thought it was really stupid on the big screen. What did you think about that whole sequence where she's shooting the aliens and they're having to dodge the acid blood while they're in zero gravity?
Well, first of all, I just think it's ridiculous that they would be able to avoid, the acid blood altogether.
Yeah,
I would assume at least Andy would have gotten some on him. But what also made me scratch my head was the fact that Rain tells Andy, "Hey, follow my lead," and I'm like, Andy is an android. I'm sure he would be able to calculate a trajectory much better than you.
Yes.
So would it make more sense for Rain to follow Andy? But it's neither here nor there.
Or something else they could have done, right? If Rain goes first, maybe Andy notices something that Rain doesn't see, and like he's not necessarily sacrifices himself, but he gets hit by the acid to protect her.
Or either that, or he guides her, like tell her, like, hey,
of course, yes.
Or like in 3 seconds, turn right or turn left or something like that.
Yes, I agree. I think there was more they could have done there. And I like how, once again, going back to the nostalgia and the callbacks, right? So they see Rook on the screen, and he says the same line. He says, "I can't lie about your chances, but you have my sympathies," right? Which harkens back to the original one. So once again, kind of a line that they threw out there from the original. Then they, make it to the elevator shaft, right? And you kind of see a lot of things going on. One of the aliens, the xenomorph, whatever you want to call them, is like up in Rain's face. Very much like the really infamous scene from Alien 3, right? Where Sigourney Weaver's in that medical area, and the alien gets right up to her face. So a very, very clear callback to that. And then literally just a minute after that sequence, you see Andy kind of going, kind of like shooting the gun on the alien as he drops from the ceiling. And he says the very infamous, "Get away from her, you bitch." But he says it very nonchalantly.
Get away from her. You bitch.
So it kind of takes all the enthusiasm out of it. But I guess something an alien would do. But yeah, all that just felt like there was just too much nostalgia for me there. Did you feel like this sequence in particular, did it get really distracting for you? Or like, I guess I'm just curious if that was maybe as big of an issue for you as it was for me. Because outside of like the zero graph sequence, there was just too many callbacks where I'm like, okay, I know it's from this one, I know it's from that one, and I feel like it just kind of, I don't know, it felt like they were purposely trying to borrow from stuff, and I just didn't feel like it worked. What are your thoughts?
I mean, they did lean too heavily on the nostalgia, but I mean, it's like I said, I mean, it's been par for the course this year. So, I mean, so at this point, I would be surprised if they didn't do the callback, and I don't mean that in a good way. Now I will say this: when Rick says that line about "I can't lie to you about your chances," I thought that was very appropriate. I thought,
oh yeah, it works. Yep.
Yeah, but the other line, "Get away from her, you bitch," I was like, that wasn't really needed. Plus the entire time I kept thinking Ray, would be the person to say it. So when Andy said it, I'm like, okay, that's a very interesting misdirect right there. I also kind of feel like with that particular line, that's more of Sigourney's line. So like anybody else saying it, it would be a bit weird,
Oh yeah, that's a good. I didn't think about that, but that's true, right? Because we have Rook, or I guess Ian Holm, because it's Ash in the first one.
Yeah.
But his like model had said that in the past, so it definitely does that. But yeah, there's just like I said, to me, it was very they do it a lot there, and like I guess it would have been less distracting if maybe they sprinkled it in more throughout the film. I felt like that kind of sequence right there, it was very heavy-handed with the references, like it said earlier. But yeah, so we have Rain and Andy. They're able to, escape. They meet up with Kay, who's still alive, but keep in mind she did inject herself with the black goo. And they end up going out into space. And very much like in the first Alien, right, where we kind of get that misdirection that we feel like it's all over. Everything's going to be kind of ending now. We kind of get the fourth act, so to speak, transition where it's like, oh, well, everything's not quite okay. So we see that Kay had been put into like the little cryostasis chamber, but clearly something was going on. So you see Rain opens up the little pod, and Kay went from having no noticeable bump to having like the baby look like it was about to pop out of her stomach.
We'll keep in mind, like she was pregnant the entire time.
Yes, correct.
So.
Yes, yep. She was pregnant initially, so clearly the goo had done something to her, and it kind of expedites the process, and it makes me think of Prometheus when she's having like the C-section and everything.
Yeah.
But she gives birth, and everyone's always like, childbirth is so beautiful. I'm like, you haven't seen this movie because that was one of the most disgusting things I've seen.
It was very, very sick. Like,
yes, it was. So, and I'm not gonna lie, like up until now, right? I've thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I think that there's been some clear callbacks that I feel like is just getting too much into the callback type of thing, but I've been relatively okay with it. I felt like this last 15 minutes almost ruined the movie. And I'll say almost, right? Because to me, like having the human alien hybrid was totally unneeded. I don't know what their decision was to do something like this. It's very much like Alien Resurrection, where you're trying to, like, we see the experiments and we see how they're trying to mold Ripley with the aliens and everything. So like they kind of do that in this sequence where you have this like weird lanky alien creature that spawns out, and it's like, I don't know, like 7-8 feet tall. It's like huge. You see it ends up feasting on Kay, and Kay eventually dies. Kind of feel bad for her because she kind of was really kind of on the ship for most of it. So she just kind of got screwed in this sequence. But you see this like weird hybrid thing is there. So Kay decides like, oh, cool, I gotta help. I gotta help take care of this. So it kind of ends the way the Alien Covenant kind of ends, where you have the alien on the ship and they open up the door. And I mean, I guess they did an Alien, so I guess it's not unique to Covenant, but she opens up the cargo bay doors to kind of like release everything. There's kind of this fight between the human alien hybrid and Rain. But eventually, it gets sucked out to space. Rain's saved. And her and Andy kind of go into cryostasis as they go to their final destination. But yeah, I felt like out of everything that was in there, this human alien hybrid was a very, very poor choice. What did you think about the inclusion of this in the final segment?
I mean, in terms of callback, it looked very much like the engineer from Prometheus.
That's good. Yep, that's true.
I mean, just from the way that its eyes were set, the head shape, the skin tone, everything about it.
That's true.
I mean, what's wrong with just using a xenomorph for the final scene? I mean,
yeah.
Why did you have to go that route?
Yeah, I mean, hell, like you could have done something to make the xenomorph that we see in the first one, right? Because it survives, and that's what they have. So, like, why not like give it like some type of special thing, and that ends up being the ultimate. I don't know. I think there was different things that you could have done for this without kind of like just pulling this hybrid character out of your ass with like a few minutes to go. It just felt totally unneeded. But yeah, that is Alien Romulus. So I guess I will help summarize my final thoughts. I enjoyed this for the most part. I'm obviously huge into the Alien franchise. I really like them. I would say this is not as good, right? Not nearly as good as the first two, right? Alien and Aliens. But I probably like this a little bit more than Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and certainly better than Alien 3 and Resurrection. So I think in the pedestal where I would rank this in the Alien franchise, it's definitely in the top half. I thought a lot of the first half of it, I felt like, okay, cool. Like they're doing something not like totally unique or different, but unique enough that I was like, okay, like I'm on board with this. This is cool. I could deal with this. And then I just felt like they just tried too hard to throw the member berries at you. And it's so weird because it wasn't needed. It was good by itself. And I felt like the member berries just kind of saltied it for me, right? I think it just kind of dragged down the core story by just trying to add everything in. It absolutely felt like a fan film at that stage because it's just like you're just trying to there's paying homage to something you appreciate, and then there's just like outright like using story beats from it, and it didn't really work for me. That part really was bad. And then like I said, the last sequence at the very end was, to me, that I was like, I had messaged one of my friends at the time. I was like, hey, I'm watching Alien Romulus. I think they're about to throw it away in the last 15 minutes. And it was close to doing it, but I think it overall did escape. But yeah, it was so weird because I think if I was just to look at the first half of the film, I would really enjoy it. I thought it was good. It was interesting. You had the characters, some of them maybe not as well defined as you wanted, but I was okay with it. But yeah, it felt like it really kind of like started to roll off the cliff, right? I don't want to say fall off the cliff, right? It just kind of slowly deteriorated from there. But yeah, so that's my final thoughts. Luca, you can hit me with yours.
I mean, I was gonna say, like, in terms of the overall story, I felt like it did what it needed to do. I mean, there were moments where I was genuinely terrified. Obviously, the last scene where Kay's giving birth, that really freaked me out. What I will say is that, to your point, I mean, it's easy to make a movie that stands on its own merits, right? It could have been another edition that was just, that's in the same tier as Alien and Aliens, but obviously they shot themselves in the foot by trying to remind everybody, hey, in case you didn't notice, this is an Alien movie. We got to put all these callbacks in there just so you can remember. And it reminds me of those class assignments from way back in the day where your teacher will say, well, when you do your assignment, make sure you include this and this in order to get the minimum grade. And that's what I felt like. I felt like as long as you included several elements, including callback lines, then it qualifies as an Alien movie. And it shouldn't have to do that because if you do it right, if you write the story correctly, and if you kind of move the story along in the best way possible, kind of navigate the characters in a way that doesn't rely too heavily on nostalgia, you could have another a fresh reboot to the franchise, as it were. But I feel like I feel like if you're going to lean too heavily in that, then you might as well just have Rain be a younger or another version of Ripley.
Yeah,
because that's been done before. I will say this though, the visual, in terms of the visual aspect, I thought it was phenomenal. Like
absolutely.
I thought by far, like, it was one of the most beautiful films ever. The score was amazing. I thought, I mean, we mentioned this before, but the actor who played Andy did a phenomenal job. I thought Rain did a phenomenal job as well as the final girl. I just wish we knew more about Tyler, because Tyler just seems to know a lot of things, and yet there's no explanation as to how he knows all these things, And if they had mentioned if they dropped some sort of throwaway line like, "Oh yeah, Dad used to show me this when he was on the base," that would kind of like make it curious. Okay, so was he with the Colonial Marines? Is that how he knows all all these things, because you notice earlier in the movie, when they're exploring that space station, he does that military gesture, and Bjorn calls him out on that.
Yeah.
And Tyler just says, oh, it's because it's cool. I'm just thinking, you could have done a lot with that.
Mhm.
Bjorn could have said, oh, is that another thing that Dad taught you? And it's like, yeah. And that would have laid breadcrumbs to to maybe what we would see later on in Aliens and the other movies. But I feel like that there were some wasted opportunities that they didn't really cash on that could have if nothing else, piqued our curiosity into these characters. But at the end of the day, it's just one of those things where it's like, here are the characters. Don't love them too much because they're going to be killed in the next few minutes. So
Yes. Yeah, I agree. It was very much the Rain and Andy show, and everyone else kind of got slighted as far as everything else goes. So
yeah,
yeah, I guess final score, right? So I think for me, I would probably give this a 3.7 xenomorphs out of 5. I think overall, like I said, I enjoyed it for the most part. I just wish it, had a little bit more courage to kind of stand on its own. I think I'm fine with callbacks, right? Especially with the big franchise like this, it's okay. But geez, I felt like after a while, I was just literally watching some type of weird zombie creation of like just splicing scenes from other Alien films into this to make it work. So I felt like it had a better opportunity to stand more of its merit, and they missed the mark, at least in that aspect of it. So I guess, Luca, what did you think?
I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. It's a good movie. I enjoyed it, but it's not one of those movies that I'm dying to watch over and over again. Like, if given the choice, I would definitely watch and rewatch Alien all over again.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, like, for what it is, it did what it had to do, and it delivered. So, yep, that's my score. I will say this too. Like, I did enjoy the fact they did borrow from Alien Isolation, the video game, because they did set it on a space station. So when you're in that confined space, it just makes it all the more terrifying. Now, obviously, Nostromo and that ship that they salvage, it's a much smaller space. But I feel like with the space station, there's a lot more at stake, because there are just so many places you can go to, but you don't know what's in there. But that's just me. But yeah, go ahead and let us know down in the comments below what you think, if you enjoyed Alien Romulus, or if you think we're just talking nonsense. And as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.